A couple of weeks ago, Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York was demanding that Donald Trump send him more ventilators. It then came out that the ventilators they had in New York were just being stockpiled. It wasn't that they didn't necessarily need them, but they didn't need more. Donald Trump resisted this, and as it turns out right now, it seems that we've passed the peak in New York, and it turns out Andrew Cuomo didn't actually need many of these ventilators. That doesn't mean it was the right decision to withhold them, but it does mean that Donald Trump was right about New York not needing them. Well, he's certainly tweeting about it. Trump is certainly being proven right in many different ways, especially as many of these governors now call for the economy to be reopened. But the strangest thing is happening. You see, all throughout the coronavirus pandemic, the media has slammed Donald Trump for everything he said and ignored or praised Democratic governors for doing or saying the exact same things. Take, for instance, hydroxychloroquine. The potential treatment for coronavirus might not cure it, might work, who knows? The president said he's hopeful and wants to see trials. The media slammed the president over and over again and blamed him for any potential adverse effects. Meanwhile, Andrew Cuomo of New York actually put it to use, and the media said nothing. Right now, Andrew Cuomo is saying we need to reopen the economy. There's no negative press about him saying this needs to happen. Yet meanwhile, Dr. Phil on Fox News is being called ostensibly pro-Trump for arguing that we need to open the economy. It makes almost no sense. But I guess if you understand how the media and the establishment works, you understand what they're doing. If it's coming from Fox News or the president, it must be bad. If it's coming from Andrew Cuomo, a Democrat, just ignore it and say nothing. Well, now we're seeing protests spark up around the country as protesters demand, notably in Michigan, that they reopen the economy. But we have seen protests all over the country. For some reason, these protests are called unhinged. When Donald Trump tweets in support of them, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks says he needs to be impeached for inciting violence. Yet when other governors say it's also time to reopen the economy because we can't sustain this, they don't say anything. Donald Trump once again proven right. But the media just says he's wrong no matter what he does, even if he's in agreement, for the most part, with other governors. It's really hard to figure out what's going on. It makes no sense. But let's read the news, and I'm going to walk you through this. Let me just tell you, some of these progressives, notably Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, they're tweeting unhinged nonsense, and it makes it really difficult for any of us to actually track what's happening. But I've got the receipts. I got the sources. Let's read. CNBC says New York still struggles with 2,000 new coronavirus hospitalizations a day, Governor Cuomo says. Now, the first thing I want to point out, this title is absolutely fascinating because it doesn't really reflect the context of what's happening. We are seeing less hospitalizations, less intubations. Things are going pretty well, but CNBC wants to frame it like a serious negative. Meanwhile, Cuomo's actually saying we're going to slowly start reopening the economy. Now, Cuomo has extended the lockdown, but we are entering this period. Trump has said we are going to be doing a multi-phased reopening of the economy, and it's up to the governors. Governors have agreed with him, not all of them, but some of them. Yet somehow the press about Trump is negative. The press about Cuomo is framed as a negative while not slamming Cuomo himself. Before we read this, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There are several ways that you can support me, but the best thing you can do, share this video. YouTube likes to prop up mainstream media sources, and while I actually use mainstream media sources, I provide greater context than you'll often get on the front page. But more importantly, if you just think I do a good job, you're not going to see me on the front page. If you like this stuff and you want to help, sharing this video helps support me more than, well, it stops the algorithmic suppression, I'll put it that way. But if you want to get more videos like this, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and hit the notification bell to make sure, to what extent it helps, you'll get more videos like this. CNBC reports, New York is still struggling to contain the coronavirus outbreak across the state, with 2,000 new hospitalizations a day, even as public officials make plans to gradually reopen parts of the economy for business, Andrew Cuomo said Friday. Cuomo and other governors across the nation are desperate to loosen restrictions and reopen businesses that were shuttered to help curb the outbreak that's already killed more than 33,000 people in the U.S. since emerging from Wuhan, China less than 4 months ago. Quote, the situation we have now is unsustainable. People can't stay in their homes for this length of time. They can't stay out of work. You can't keep the economy closed forever. You just can't, Cuomo said. Society can't handle it personally or economically. So now we're moving into another phase, which is the reopening phase. On Thursday, Cuomo announced that he was extending the state's shutdown of non-essential businesses to May 15th as officials try to strike a delicate balance between a balance of getting people back to work without causing cases to spike again. Cuomo said people have had a nice break, but they are anxious to get out of the house and get back to work without getting sick and dying. Death is bad, and even though staying at home and not getting a paycheck is bad, it's not as bad as death. That's the yin and the yang here. While the hospitals in New York aren't as overwhelmed with coronavirus cases as originally predicted, Cuomo said the state is far from claiming victory. So I get it. We're still seeing many more people coming to the hospitals. But where's the apology? You know, Donald Trump said, I don't need to send 40,000 ventilators to New York. Well, Trump was right. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it was the right decision to not give them the ventilators. Maybe it would have made sense to give them an important buffer. But perhaps many of these ventilators needed to go to other states which have yet to see the peak of the coronavirus infections, in which case Trump was right. It was the right decision. We can see now that after all is said and done, maybe it was a risky move or not. Governor Cuomo does not need all these ventilators. And we've seen the graphics. Check this out. This one, I believe, is from this morning. I believe so, yes. And you can see at the recent press conference, it looks like the apex has hit and we are going down in terms of total hospitalizations. They are seeing a net negative intubations, meaning more people are coming off of ventilators than are going on them, which means they didn't really need that many. So again, you can argue it all day and night, but let me show you how the media plays this game. I love this. I love this. Okay. Obviously, I'm being sarcastic. USA Today on April 1st said this, fact check. Does New York have a stockpile of thousands of unneeded ventilators? ? Curious. I wonder who was pushing the idea that New York had unneeded ventilators. It would seem, as they often do with fact checks, they added this extra word, unneeded. I don't see the majority of high-profile personalities challenging Cuomo, saying he didn't need the ventilators he had. They were saying he didn't need the ventilators he was asking for because he had not yet used the ones in his stockpile. And because of this unneeded word, you can see how USA Today has concluded false. While it is true that New York maintains a stockpile of ventilators not in use, it is incorrect that these machines are unneeded. The current number of ventilators deployed in the state are enough to meet the increased challenge that COVID-19 poses to the healthcare system. That said, healthcare professionals fear that the increasing number of cases could quickly overwhelm the system. Current stockpiles are meant to address that future need. Though projections vary on whether that supply will be enough, we rate this claim as partly false because some of it was not supported by our research. Partly false. They could have said mostly true, right? This is how the media manipulates you into thinking that the president is wrong. Cuomo said we need tens of thousands of ventilators. Trump sent, I believe, around 4,000 to 5,000. Ultimately, they had around 10,000. They didn't need more than that. Fact check here. This fact check, I fact check as false. Nobody was arguing that they didn't need the ones they had in the stockpile. They were arguing that he hadn't even used the ones he had. Why should we send more to just dump them in a stockpile? You can't trust the media, man. You can take a look at how they treat Dr. Phil, smearing him while meanwhile governors are saying the exact same thing. Well, Trump and Cuomo are still battling over the funding to the states. This is as of today. The Hill reports President Trump and New York Governor Cuomo on Friday sparred over additional federal assistance for states as they try to ramp up their respective COVID-19 testing. This is part of a series of tweets that Donald Trump has put out where he basically pointed this out, the point I was making. Governor Cuomo should spend more time doing and less time complaining. Get out there and get the job done. Stop talking. We built you thousands of hospital beds that you didn't need or use, gave large numbers of ventilators that you should have had, and helped you with testing that you should be doing. We have given New York far more money, help, and equipment than any other state, and by far. And these great men and women who did the job never hear you say thanks. Your numbers are not good. Less talk, more action. I highlight this just to point out. Trump is calling out Cuomo saying, we gave you all of these things. You didn't need them. It's rather fascinating, though. You know, Trump's approval rating has taken a bit of a dip in certain polls. It's still actually higher than it's been for most of his presidency. But you have all of these governors critical of the president demanding more and more resources when it turns out they had substantially more than they actually needed. Cuomo says New York's new net hospitalizations hit low since coronavirus pandemic, and that was on the 9th. How are we still having this conversation? Now, listen, it might be a little presumptive, maybe a little too early to declare victory on the coronavirus cases in New York. It's possible that as Andrew Cuomo slowly starts to reopen the economy, things may actually get worse. We may see more hospitalizations, and thus they may actually need more ventilators. But I'm going to go ahead and make the bet, at least for now, it seems not to be the case. While I can't predict it with absolute certainty, I can say if they are taking people off of the ventilators more than they're putting them on, if they slowly reopen the economy and they do see another, reemergence of more hospitalizations, it seems like they'll have more ventilators sitting around. But you can see how the game is played, and they definitely want to make it seem like everything's worse than it's ever been. It will only get worse. But sure enough, the models we have seen from Cuomo and have shown this time and time again. On the 5th, Axios shows us this chart. We can see that the actual use, the purple line, dramatically lower than what they projected with social distancing. So how do we get to this point where then Dr. Phil claims shutdown deadlier than coronavirus in wild Fox News appearance? How do we get to this point? Well, I'll tell you. I just criticized the media rather heavily. I'm going to show you some more insanity from even alternative or digital media. But if it comes from somebody on Fox, if it comes from the president, they will absolutely go nuts and completely ignore reality. They will use manipulative fact checking, adding words that change the context of what's being presented to trick you. And some people fall for it. Naturally, the people who distrust the media will probably find themselves on the right or whatever you want to, however you want to describe it, because clearly none of us are actually arguing policy. It makes no sense. I mean, take a look at the example. Cuomo and Trump, while they're bickering and disagreeing on certain things, Cuomo's praised Trump on other things, and they both kind of agree. Let's reopen the economy. They agree on that, right? Then how do you have a conflicting narrative from the media? Because it's not about policy at all. It's about which tribe you are in. Will you recognize that Donald Trump was right about most of this stuff so far? Okay, then you're a Trump supporter. That's what they'll say about Dr. Phil. But Andrew Cuomo is a Democrat. So when he comes out and says basically the same thing, that people need to get back to work, we can't sustain this, well, they ignore it. They say nothing negative. Can you imagine what a regular person must be thinking when they're watching the news? They're out of work. They're at home. 22 million people. They see Trump say it and they go, huh. Then they see Andrew Cuomo say it, but the media, smears the president for it. Well, right now, Donald Trump is supporting the protesters, the people who are demanding these states open up. Liberate. Trump tweets support of protests against stay-at-home orders. Yes, many people came out, Michigan being a very notable state, because Michigan has the strictest lockdown orders of any other state. Governor Whitmer. Many people predict or suggest, I should say, that she's enforcing these very severe lockdown orders to generate attention because she may be Joe Biden's vice presidential pick. Though many people say that she's actually hurting her chances because it's extremely controversial, it's hard to know for sure. But protesters came out and Donald Trump tweeted a series of tweets about liberating Minnesota, liberating Michigan, and liberating Virginia. Now, sure, Trump tweets things. I don't think this matters at all. But of course, because some of the protesters were armed, which is their Second Amendment right, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks snaps. And here's what we see. The reason I want to highlight this is because we've seen many progressives complain about the mainstream media. But listen, I can complain about the mainstream media lying about Trump and lying about you, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks. They smeared you when you ran for Congress. They smear Bernie Sanders. But now when Trump tweets some silly things, Cenk goes completely off the rails. So if you want to complain about the press, I advise you to look into the mirror because you're right there with the rest of them. He tweeted this in response to Trump. This is incredibly dangerous. There are armed right-wing lunatics walking around the state capitol, and this fascist wannabe tells his deranged followers to liberate the state. Also destroys so-called three-step reopening plan with a siege of Democratic governors. Insanity. Oh, okay. So now that Trump has tweeted a plan, three-phase to reopen the economy, and he's telling the governors, do your thing, Cenk is now opposed to this reopening or what Donald Trump has proposed. Okay, well, there's more. He says, this is direct incitement of violence, especially at a time when people are very agitated. It's intolerable. Joe Biden has significant issues, but when your alternative is this fascist madman, then you're cornered. There's no way not to vote for Biden. And there it is. Give Cenk an excuse to support Joe Biden, a man that can't speak, a man that was rejected by the progressive left and Bernie Sanders supporters. The DSA across the board saying don't vote for Biden. Well, you need some way to justify it if you want to pander to the establishment, right? Well, there you go. Donald Trump tweets, "Liberate Virginia and save your great Second Amendment. It is under siege." What does that even mean? How are you going to blame the president for tweeting a silly opinion? Guess what? People are allowed to have opinions. Now, of course, Cenk and many people like him operate under the assumption or the impression that you are responsible for what other people do if you voice your opinion. And I think it's fair to say, within reason, with great power comes great responsibility. But come on, man. Are we going to blame every single person for what other people do? We can't do it. But of course, Cenk Uygur then takes it to the logical conclusion. He said, if anyone commits violence against officials in Michigan, Minnesota, or Virginia, real Donald Trump should be impeached again. I'm not joking. He clearly incited violence. He's a deranged madman, and we have to get him out of office before he does more damage. This is unprecedented. Why? Because Trump is bombastic? You know what, man? There's always some excuse to pretend like Donald Trump is the worst thing on the planet. And it seems, like I mentioned earlier, okay, Cuomo and Trump should be proof enough to you. It's not about policy at all. And what Cenk Uygur is doing here shows it as well. It's just about tribe. Listen, man, I'm willing to have a conversation about reopening the governments. I'm willing to, reopening the economy. I'm willing to have a conversation about whether what Governor Whitmer did is right or wrong. Should the economy be shut down initially? Well, the answer is simply yes. Donald Trump, you'll notice there's a lot of subjects I don't actually get into when it comes to tribal bickering because I don't much care for either tribe. I'm not here to defend you just based on what you say your title is. I care about what makes sense and what is going to work. Governor Whitmer locked down Michigan to a rather absurd degree. There was some concern for many people that they couldn't actually buy gardening supplies, notably seeds. While this was technically correct, it was difficult to buy in many areas because parts of stores were shut down. Governor Whitmer banned other things, like you can't even go to other residences that you actually have access to. And it was considered to be one of the strictest lockdown orders in the country. Now, people are protesting this. It's interesting to me that when it comes to principle, Cenk Uygur will call Donald Trump a fascist, meanwhile, completely ignoring the government taking away your First Amendment right to protest, to gather, free speech, and freedom to worship. How could Trump be the fascist when he's calling for liberation? Isn't that the weirdest thing ever? It shows you that it's not really about freedom, fascism. It's just I don't like this tribe. Cenk Uygur doing the exact same thing the media did to him. They play politics, they play tribe. So long as Cenk, the Young Turks, and these other leftists are standing behind the establishment left, they're left alone. Once Bernie Sanders stands up, then he gets torn to shreds. Once Cenk Uygur challenges the establishment Democratic politician in his district, he gets torn to shreds. So what does he do? He falls in line. I find it rather sad because, he had a real opportunity to stand up and call out the media and the lies that actually hold him back. But I guess as we've seen from the Young Turks and many media outlets, the money is just too good. There's a reason why they're not calling out Andrew Cuomo. Well, he's a Democrat and he's popular. And they're not really expecting to get a Cuomo bump. I mean, the reality is no one really cares about Andrew Cuomo. Maybe there's the partisanship. A lot of people, Alyssa Milano, for instance, said that he was America's president. Sure. The establishment types are lining up Cuomo for a presidential run in 2024. It's not going to happen now. It might at the last minute. Apparently, he won't be the vice president for Biden. We'll see how things play out. But they're protecting him for political reasons. It's also because the money just isn't there. One of the biggest motivators for media is whether or not by putting out this nonsense, they will get clicks. And guess what? When it comes to Cuomo, it ain't going to happen. Most of the country does not care about the governor of New York, but Donald Trump is the president, so they can light up certain portions of the population by saying Trump is bad. They'll ignore what Cuomo is doing. Over in New York, they'll praise him. Democratic operatives and activists will praise Cuomo for doing literally the same thing that Donald Trump has done or suggested. Then they'll claim that Trump is the fascist for saying the government shouldn't be locking things down. It's very, very backwards. Let me tell you about principle. The reality is we have a constitution. Shall not be infringed. The government shall make no law infringing upon, etc., etc. Yet we've seen across the country many states do just that. Should Trump be tweeting, liberate Michigan, liberate Virginia? Honestly, what does it even mean? And who cares? He's calling for people to defend the constitutional rights to freedom? Fine. Many of these governors actually agree they should be reopening things anyway, so it's just Trump making stupid tweets that don't matter. A lot of people are going to like them. They're going to say, here, here, Donald Trump, fine. So then what's the criticism? Nothing. Nothing but tribe. You see, when it comes to some of these lockdowns and it comes to the press and it comes to the attack on Donald Trump, they're actually talking about this in a political context. They're saying that Trump is only targeting these states because they're Democrat run and because he's ultimately trying to make Governor Gretchen Whitmer look bad because she could be the vice president for Joe Biden. That's always the game, isn't it? That Trump is doing things as part of this re-election nefarious plot. Has it ever occurred to them that maybe Donald Trump is just impulsive? Oh, they claim they know it, but then everything he does must have some secret 4D chess thing. This is what I love about the anti-Trump smears. You've got Trump supporters saying that Donald Trump is playing 4D chess. Every move he makes is a secret calculation well beyond what the Democrats are doing. And I actually kind of agree with this in a lot of ways. I don't think Trump is always thinking ahead. But as I've said in the past, Trump is playing chess. Democrats are playing checkers. It doesn't mean that he's got a plan for everything he's doing, but it does seem like there's certain things he's done that have been strategic. Notably, when he puts out offensive tweets about, say, the Squad, Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar, etc., it distracted from an asylum rule change, a rather drastic one. And nobody said anything about it. It was funny seeing the activists tweet like, hey, why aren't we tweeting about this asylum rule change? Oh, because everybody was calling Trump naughty words because he said naughty words on Twitter. Seems like there's real strategy there. The funny thing about this is the Democrats on the left will come out and say, Trump's not playing 4D chess. Trump's a moron. And then when it comes to what Trump is doing with Ukraine or with Gretchen Whitmer, it's a secret 4D chess plan for re-election. Which is it? Is Trump a bumbling moron, or is he an authoritarian mastermind working on a secret plot to get reelected? It can't be both, but certainly that's what they're trying to claim. Whenever it's convenient, Trump's a moron, Trump's a mastermind. Trump, why is he criticizing Governor Whitmer? Because everybody knows she's potentially going to be Joe Biden's VP. So Trump's trying to discredit her and smear her and make her look bad before she gets chosen. Why was Trump trying to investigate what was going on with Ukraine and Joe Biden? Clearly, it was because he knew Joe Biden would be the nominee, and he was trying to preempt this and make him look bad, even though at the time, secret audio was released showing Trump was worried about Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders actually ended up becoming the front runner for a short period of time. No, I'm sorry. It's always just about Trump being the absolute mastermind. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to know why there's good reason to challenge these lockdowns? It's not because Gretchen Whitmer might be VP. Even Newsweek is saying she's taking a major political price for this. It could be bad for her. It's because of things like this. This is Phil Kerpen who said, tweeting out this story. This paper from China reviewed over 7,000 cases from 320 cities. Their conclusion, home outbreaks were the dominant category. We identified only a single outbreak in an outdoor environment, which involved 2 cases. This was replicated by other studies in, I believe, in the West, not outside of China. The reason I say that is because I don't trust China. What they found was that indoor environments, homes, and offices had the highest likelihood of transmission. Makes a lot of sense. There's much less things to touch, there's a lot more surface area in a confined space. When you're outside, what are you going to do? Touch the same piece of grass or air? So sure enough, you have people rightly pointing this out, saying perhaps banning people from going to parks and going paddleboarding is the opposite of what we should be doing. We should be encouraging people to be outside as much as possible, just not in offices or in homes. But of course, they lock everything down, make everybody stay home. Then people transmit this to their family members. As much as I don't trust Chris Cuomo, he's now saying that his wife has contracted COVID. So when it comes to someone like, say, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noems, she gets slammed. The Washington Post writes South Dakota is becoming the biggest hotspot. They demand she lock things down. And there are several Republican governors who are saying, we're just not going to do it. This is really strange to me. But I think there's a real risk here. If the media can only ever criticize someone based on the perceived otherness of the person, like not the policies you're enacting, but just you are the other, therefore you're the worst thing possible, then the only outcome I can imagine is civil conflict of some sort. I don't know what to expect. But I will tell you this as we wrap up this segment. Donald Trump didn't give all of those ventilators to New York, and he was slammed for it. And now it turns out New York didn't need them. And Trump, once again, will be slammed for pointing this out. We will not see a media establishment come out and say Trump was right about New York's need for ventilators. They will say it doesn't matter if Cuomo didn't end up using them. Trump was reckless and risked everyone's lives, blah, blah, blah. What do you expect? The media doesn't smear or slam Cuomo when he says the same things. So how are we supposed to navigate what's really going on right now? I honestly have no idea. It's very confusing. I'm told by YouTube there are things I can't talk about while the Washington Post talks about them. I guess we'll just do our best. I appreciate you all watching videos like this, and I'll leave it there. Stick around. The next segment will be coming up at 6 p.m. at youtube.com/TimCastNews. It is a different channel, and I'll see you all then.